Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
So we are continuing our discussion of Malchut, of the Melech, of the king, and the king's role within Judaism. So we've talked a little bit theoretically for the last couple weeks, but now it's time to get down to business. We need a king. Or do we? Well, that is a question. The Torah mentions a king there in the book of Deuteronomy, but between the time we leave Egypt and the time we get our first king, King Saul, how much time passes?
A few hundred years.
About 400 years. About 400, give or take. It's a little hard to estimate sometimes because the time in the book of Judges, which precedes the king, the judges overlap, we think. They don't lay out their chronology quite so clearly for us, and so we have to estimate it was about 400 years. Moses, God had right there. God didn't make Moses a king. Joshua comes along after Moses in the land of Israel now. Maybe we were waiting for land to be sovereign over. Nope, does not become a king. And then after Joshua, we have a cycle of judges, some of which you might know, such as Gideon and Deborah or Samson. Others perhaps a little less familiar to you, like Yiftach. But we had these individual chieftains, leaders of one or more tribes that would rise up. You see, there's a very clear pattern during the book of Judges, the majority of this time in our land before the king, where the people would, mess up. They would turn to idolatry, they would become immoral, they would rob, murder, and everything else you can imagine against one another. And God would go, okay, all right, fine, you're going to be like that. And then our enemies would rise up, there would be conflict, and the people would go, whoa, we were really stupid, please, someone lead us. And that's when we would have a shofet, a judge, such as Deborah, Gideon, or the others. They would rise up, they would gather the people, they would direct their heart towards God, they would meet our enemies, we would vanquish them, and they would usually have a period of good rulership. And then they would go away, passing like all flesh, and the people would backslide once again, and there'd be more turmoil, another challenge, more enemies, and then the process would repeat itself for a few hundred years. Following the cycle? Okay. At the end of those few hundred years, the people come to the prophet Samuel, and they say, we want a king. We want a king. But why they want a king is the kicker. This is where things become very difficult. Indeed, they are reprimanded for how they ask. Because they don't just say, we want a king, to stop all of this cycle of violence and backsliding. Nope. They say, look, Samuel, you're getting old. And we know you're good. You are a prophet of God. Everybody looks to you. You are amazing. But your sons, they're taking over after you, and, well, they are quite obviously corrupt. They are taking bribes. They are dallying with the various women who come to the tabernacle. These are not good guys.
How come the son takes over? This is the only time
Wait, and I will ask you that question. Right? Wait, and I will ask you that question. The people come to Samuel and complain about his sons. They say, look, you're too old. Right? We don't have term limits, but really you're retired. And your sons are taking over, and they are making a complete mess of things. So give us a king. Now, as was already hinted, we see a very interesting pattern here, because when we look through the rest of the book of Judges, preceding the rise of the prophet Samuel, we don't get a hereditary system. Deborah is not picked as a judge because she is someone's daughter. Gideon is not picked as a judge because he is someone's son. Samson doesn't become Samson because of his dad. So why all of a sudden are the sons of Samuel becoming the new leaders as their father begins to fade into the background? Any ideas?
The only thing I can think of is because he was so high up, and he seems to be the best of the judges, if you want to put him in that period, or the prophets. But.
So he was definitely one of the peak leaders of our people during an incredibly difficult time. And absolutely the respect the people gave him was transmitted naturally to his sons, and his sons took advantage of that. And his sons took advantage of that. And in the process of taking advantage of it, they basically would argue, our dad is Samuel, so if you want anything done, if you want an in with him, you have to talk to us. And this made it very natural for them to be in a position to corrupt themselves and to corrupt the institution. And so the people say, we want a king. But they add a very important clause. We want a king
Like the other
in
nations.
order to be like the other
Yeah, I
nations.
was gonna say that.
In order to be like the other nations. Because after all, there are kings to the south, we call them pharaohs. There are kings to the east and to the north, in the Hittites and other territories around Israel at the time. There were all these kings. We want one too. And that's where it breaks. You'll notice that they are not thinking clearly. Because after all, what is the defining feature of a royal monarchical government system?
Pretty much like communism, like I'm the, you know, like.
That's not communism per
But
se.
like he's like the ruler, he's like, he gets to make all the decisions.
Okay, so a king is a
Yeah.
unitary ruler, an autocrat. That is not, communism is an economic system, not a political system. So that doesn't quite map one to one.
Because, well, it's anarchy, right? And he's taking control of the whole and making all the decisions.
I think we would probably want to discuss what communism actually is versus what dictatorships that call themselves communist actually are. There is a wide chasm between them.
Communism is today's language, but I meant to say dictatorship.
Exactly.
That's
It's a
correct.
dictator, absolutely. And
And the hereditary royal line.
it's hereditary.
You know,
Right? One of the defining features of a monarchy is that when the king dies, who takes over?
Son.
The son, right? Whether it's the first son or not depends on the culture, but it is intended to provide a clear line of succession, right? Rather than having these judges who come up and then go away and then a new one comes up, we'll have a nice, clear line of succession, and that means we'll be stable, like all the other countries around us. Do we see the flaw in the argument of at the same time asking for a king which will provide a hereditary line that will give us stability, they are rejecting a hereditary line of Samuel as not being good enough? Well, what guarantee do you have that the son of the king is going to be good enough? Right? If Samuel's son isn't going to be good enough, a prophet of God isn't good enough, because after all, no matter how we raise our children, we know they are individuals who will choose their own path, and his sons chose a very bad path. If it's not reliable even in the household of Samuel that the son will turn out to be another good person, how can we count on a king's son to take over from their father and be a good king? And indeed, we do not see two successive generations of kings, both being very good. David and Solomon come closest, but even Solomon is really falling apart by the end of his reign. And after that,
Goes down.
all the other kings we get, the only others that we get are decent by themselves, but then their son or their father was not. We do not get successive generations of good kings. Exactly as the people were complaining about Samuel comes to pass in the monarchical system. And that is because the basic request of the people was wrong, which God explains in the book of Samuel. He says, the thing is, they have rejected me. They have rejected God, not just Samuel. It's not just about you and your sons and anything. They are rejecting me because they are looking for a king to do something that a Jewish king is not supposed to do. The idea of a Jewish king is the Jewish king is meant to be an instrument of God. They are there to help guide the people, to protect them and lead them, so that the people can be closer to God, form a more righteous and good community, and be able to, of course, defend and secure the land in which they are in order for that to take place. The king is not there to aggrandize themselves. The king is not there to amass wealth for himself. The king is not there to dominate the individuals within the community and to control them as the king wishes. The king is merely an implement, an instrument of God to help guide the nation. And the nation needs cohesion, sometimes, which is why the Torah allows for the institution of the monarchy in the first place. But that institution always has to be subjected to the constant criticism of Torah and of God. And unfortunately, the people do not seem to be thinking that way when they are asking for a king. Which is why Samuel appoints Saul. And with Saul, we see somebody who is on the cusp, vacillating between those two modes of rulership. He will flip between being devoted to God, indeed even prophesying at times, to being somebody who is completely consumed with his own paranoia and his own desires, and rejecting all that God has instructed him to do. Saul, which we will talk about next week, lays out this binary option of what we will see, of kings that are self-serving and kings that are serving to the nation and God. Unfortunately, Saul will eventually implode, and then he'll be replaced by David. But that'll be in 2 weeks' time. Well, actually, that'll be in longer than that, because that'll be after I come back from my vacation. But next week, we will talk about Saul and see just how good and how bad the first run of king can be. With that, I will